It's funny. It's funny when I'm not ready for the cue, Larry. Welcome to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits, and I'd like to welcome everyone on this Monday. If you're out and about enjoying this 3-day weekend, and you get yourself a day off work, right on. Larry Schaller was nice enough to come in on his day off, which is a real big deal. Again, welcome to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits. We are the Way Out. We are an intensive outpatient program for substance use disorders primarily, and we work with adolescents and adults and their families, and we are located on the corner of Plum and Bouquet Canyon. And give us a call. If we come on this show every week, we do this show, and one of the things that I like to remind people of is if you or a neighbor or a loved one is having trouble with any sort of mental health issues, whether that be substance use disorder or anything else, reaching out and asking for help is the very first step. There's a lot of wonderful resources out there, and a lot of people that are willing to help, and a lot of professionals that really, we live in a time today where unfortunately it's more prevalent than ever, but also it has warranted us to really have some great resources and some great interventions for all those issues. So give us a call at 296-4444. Visit our website at thewayoutrrecoveryscv.com and get the help that you or a loved one might need. Today is a real special show for me. I love working with Larry and anybody over at the Health and Wellness Center at College of the Canyons. But as we go through this show, I think it's really important for us to remember the celebration of today as well, and remember all the wonderful work that Dr. Martin Luther King did in his lifetime that has continued. We certainly have a long way to go. That's pretty evident in, all the media and everything that's going on out there today. But it is a real big reminder for us to love our fellow man, for us to look out for each other, to embrace the diversity that is around us all the time. And I think in Santa Clarita, we do a wonderful job of doing that, but everywhere we could certainly continue to get better. So as you go through your day today, remember, just take a little extra time to go and say hello to the person you might not know, or, even take it a step further. As you're walking down the street, go and say hi to somebody that you normally wouldn't do so to, and reach out and sort of embrace that we are all one here, and we really need to love and care and protect and take care of each other. That being said, as we start this new year, 2018, we want to remind everyone of the resources and the things that are available out there. Probably a couple of times a year, Larry, I'm going to have you come on the show. Well, I think
it's my pleasure.
Right. And drug addiction and mental health issues and suicidality and everything that goes along in that mix. Roughly 60% of people that suffer from substance use disorders also have a co-occurring disorder, and vice versa. And so, the work that we do and the work that you guys do over at the Health and Wellness Center go absolutely hand in hand, and we have a lot of shared population. So
sure
tell us about the Health and Wellness Center, exactly what you guys are all about over there.
So at the thanks Bob, and I want to reiterate your thoughts and feelings about Martin Luther King Day. It's a really special day, and it's a good day for people to get out and be kind to one another and embrace our diversity and do something this weekend for someone else. Like we went down to the March Against Human Trafficking on Saturday, and it felt good to be around, a lot of different kinds of people with a lot of different kinds of interests. And so that sort of thing is really important. So I appreciate you mentioning that. At the Student Health and Wellness Center, we're at both campuses. We're at the College of the Canyons campus in Valencia and the one in Canyon Country. And we do a variety of things in terms of health and men and women's health. But my focus as coordinator of the mental health system is we do personal counseling for students, and we work on outreach and wellness kinds of activities across the campus, and we respond to all kinds of crises. So, we know that students are under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of stress from economics, from tests, from grades, from social issues, but we also know that there's other issues like mental health issues, depression, anxiety. People have bipolar disorder, people have schizophrenia, people have they're on the autism spectrum, they have family issues, that have domestic violence issues. We have students that are coming out of human trafficking situations. You name it, we have students there, and when we can address what's going on with them from a mental health and a personal counseling point of view, it helps them with their academic studies as well as in their personal life. So we feel like we have a really important role at the college, and I'm glad to say the college gives us a lot of support to achieve those, to really make that role possible.
Well, and as much presence as you guys have on the campus over there, both campuses, I think there are students out there that still don't even know that you're on, students that are going there on a regular basis that don't necessarily know about you. So I think it's really important for us to be on the show today to put that out there. If you have a student that's going to College of the Canyons, or you are a student yourself, remind them that there are services available. If, everybody goes through times when they're depressed or anxious, there's a lot of stress in the college atmosphere. And here is a resource that is on campus all the time that's available to anybody. You can walk in anytime and talk to someone?
You can walk in. If it's a crisis, we'll see you right then and there. If it's not a particular crisis, we can schedule a session usually that day or the day after. So we do know that students can be, sometimes they're walked in by their professor, by somebody from the staff. But yeah, it's there. We know that we've been tracking, like, for instance, suicides for the last 3 or 4 years. And about 4 years ago, we had 3 suicides of students that were that were going to the college. And the next year we had 0, and the next year we had 3 again. So we were tracking and realizing that the 3 suicides, folks that took their life.
Was that 2017?
That was in 2015. So in
Okay.
2013 and in 2015, we had 3 students. But none of those students had come to the personal counseling program. So we know if students come to the personal counseling program, we have a good chance of saving their life. And so we want students and faculty and staff and peers of students to know that if those students can get into the counseling center, we have a good chance of helping them deal with their mental health issue or their personal issues or if feelings of suicide or whatever.
Something else that is available over there, you guys have tons of resources as well. And I think that the more, well, just for instance, there are probably more than this, but I just did a little search in Santa Clarita in the last year or so, right? And right here at home, very, very public. July of 2017, there was a man who took his life on Placerita Canyon. In September of 2017, there was a man who took his life at the Oak Tree Gun Club. In December of 2017, there was a 17-year-old girl who took her life with a gun. And then most recently, the tragedy that has occurred that they have, that apparently is a murder-suicide with a family of 4 that took place on January the 5th. So right here in Santa Clarita, there's a lot of unfortunate events that are happening. And I think it's really important that there's a move towards everybody learning about signs and symptoms of mental health issues, of suicidality. I think it's really important that in the average home that people know what these signs and symptoms are. And there are things like mental health first aid that you guys have resources for. What's that about? How do we educate the public and so that they become more aware?
Well, it's really true. We've had at least 4 recent suicides. None of them were college students, but as part of our Santa Clarita Valley Suicide Prevention, Postvention, and Wellness Committee that meets once a month. That's a committee of all the providers, and KHTS has participated in that for the last 4 years or so. We track how many people who've taken their life in the last year and compare it to the year before. The good news is that we've dramatically decreased the amount of suicides in the last year, especially in transition age youth. Before we had up to like 11 transition age youth. That's like 16 to 25, and last year we only had one up until December. So we know that if we really do an all-out effort to do things like mental health first aid, like do some training, do some outreach and education, we really can have an impact. So what we do in mental health first aid is we really try to teach the warning signs. We teach about mental health, what kinds of mental health problems there are, give some information, and then we teach people how to assess for suicide, how to assess for danger to others, and how to listen non-judgmentally, and how to encourage professional help and know what sort of self-help strategies people can use. So we have different kinds of courses. One's like an 8-week course. I recommend it to everybody. We train doctors, nurses, lawyers, teachers, professors, administrators on it. So I recommend everybody take that class. It's an 8-hour class, and we do it at least once a semester at the college. I know Child and Family Center offers it as well. But we also have shorter classes like our spirit class, our suicide prevention, intervention, response training, where we do a miniaturized version of that, and it's an hour and a half. We show some videos, and we do go through the warning signs and teach people to learn how to listen non-judgmentally and assess for suicide, and sort of know what to do, know what the resources are in the community. Our community has a lot of really great resources besides the resources at the college. We have Santa Clarita Mental Health Center, we have Child and Family Center, we have Domestic Violence Center, Strengths United, Santa Clarita Valley Youth Project, just to name a few. Children's Bureau is now in town. So there's lots of private providers. There's Kaiser's, there's UCLA, there's Providence, there's FACey. So we have a lot of really good services here. Henry Mayo's got a great behavioral health unit. And so we and the sheriff has been really involved, Department of Children and Family Services, Department of Mental Health. So we have all the players here, all the providers here, and everybody is working together on this committee to make sure that we don't leave any stone unturned in terms of suicide prevention and mental health services. But there still is a stigma to getting services. We, poll students and find out, well, how come you didn't go, what are some of the barriers? And some of them are just like you said, they don't even know our services exist. That's one of the big ones.
Well, I think raising awareness, stuff like we're doing today, right? It's
right.
Just,
this is huge.
Average family sitting out there listening and go, oh, like I don't even think about that on a regular
right.
basis. So a lot of it is just talking about it on a regular basis and getting
right.
it out there so people know.
Right. And knowing where we are, like you'll ask students, well, do you know where the personal counseling center is? And they go, no, it's right across from the bookstore on the Village campus.
Well, and so if you're listening
like
or you have a student or you are a student, it's right across the street from the bookstore.
Right.
So if you're up there, go pay a visit anyway, whether you're having issues
yes.
or not, just to see where it is.
Yeah, we got some really cool brochures on virtually any health issue you might think of. And sometimes people don't think that it's important to know about relationships. So we have, brochures on acquaintance rape and men and women health and LGBTQ and how to be an ally. There's all kinds of things that we do to try to address any kind of issue that might be coming up, stress reduction, that sort of thing. So
well, and talking about the stigma, I oftentimes say this in the family interventions and groups that I do. Wouldn't it be nice? And I think we're moving towards a day where we could talk about substance abuse, mental health issues, suicidality, all the sort of uncomfortable things that are going on. Wouldn't it be nice to get to a point in our society where we talk about it the same as we do other issues like diabetes or heart disease or things like that, where we don't go, where we don't whisper about it,
Right.
where we can just like look each other in the eye and say, I have this, I'm suffering from this disease.
Right. Well, in some of our trainings, one of the first things we talk about is stigma and recovery, and knowing that people can recover. But one of the things I say is like, we try to tell people, don't say, hey, he's bipolar or he's schizophrenic. We say he's a person with bipolar disorder.
Right.
She's a person that has schizophrenia. Or don't say she's autistic. We say he's a person on the autism spectrum. Just like you don't say he's a broken arm or he's a cancer.
Right.
So, you just really want people to know that, hey, there's a person that's suffering or that's struggling with these mental health issues. And we know of all the research shows people really can recover with support and treatment and counseling, and sometimes it might take medication, sometimes not. So we want to really address that, because that's really one of the things that keeps people from coming in and getting help. Is there's a stigma to having mental health issues. There's a stigma to getting care. Some people don't think their problem is serious enough, or they say, well, I don't have time. Meanwhile they're suffering. So we want people to say, hey, this is a tool for you. This is a way you can accelerate your growth, to help you develop to the next level, and just to talk to somebody that can help you with whatever you're struggling with.
Well, and just to put it out there in terms of severity, here's why it's important to not only learn about it and become comfortable talking about it, but then to also get out there yourself and talk about it. Some of the early warning signs, just to kind of put it out there, if you have a teenager in the home with you, it looks a lot like the early warning signs with drug addiction as well.
Sure.
Change in friends, change in attitude, change in sleep patterns, appetite patterns. Maybe you notice some mood changes around
Right.
your kid, things like that,
Right.
declining grades, any sort of abnormality that takes place. And, one of the greatest things that we can do with our kids, and especially with our teenagers, it's interesting when our kids are small, we are involved in everything with them. We take them to their soccer practice. We're involved in school. We do their homework with them. And as they become teenagers and young adults, in the most stressful time in a person's life, as parents, we tend to back off and not be as involved in their life. And one of the most important things and helpful things that we can do is to know our children. Now, I'm not
Right.
saying following them around. My kids, the older they get, are not going to let me follow them around. And God, Dad, you're embarrassing me. Leave me alone, right?
Right.
But if you're spending time with your children on a regular basis and you know them, you're going to start to notice these changes. And any significant change that takes place, if I'm armed with not only the facts but the ability to talk about it openly,
Right.
I can get in there with my kid and say, hey, what's going on?
Right.
What's going on? And we can start having these discussions. And here's why it's so important. Substance abuse and the numbers of people that die as a direct result of substance abuse is one of the most deadly things that are out there, yet it's one of the least talked about things. Isn't that interesting? The thing that's killing more people than anything else is the thing we don't like to talk about the most. And when it comes to mental health issues and suicidality, I looked it up this morning, and the World Health Organization says that worldwide, 800,000 people a year. Let that sink in, right?
It's huge. It's
800,000 people a year. What that translates into is that every 40 seconds there's a completed suicide. Every 40 seconds there's a completed suicide. And what they also say is that for every one that's completed, there are 20 that are attempted. And so that's a huge, huge number of people worldwide that are either attempting or committing suicide. And the biggest group in that, second leading cause of death for 15 to 29-year-olds.
Right. It outpaces cancer and many of the other health issues combined. So for this age group, it's a huge ratio. So we really want to pay attention. We want to pay attention to warning signs that you've mentioned and others, like feeling hopeless, talking about death, talking about suicide. We want people to feel comfortable asking, "Hey, are you thinking about taking your life?"
Right.
You know, there's a myth, and maybe we can talk about it after the break, but there is a myth that says, you know, if you ask about suicide, that it puts it in their head, but it's just the opposite. It actually is often a way of showing support, and people feel relieved if you ask those kinds of questions. So we want to teach people to not be afraid to ask questions, to do what you're talking about, just going to ask what's going on and connect. And then we want to teach people to know what to do when they get the answer that might frighten them.
Yeah, it does. It scares a lot of people, and I have heard that before, and we know today that it's a myth, but a lot of people don't. Talking about it doesn't cause it. Talking about it doesn't make it worse. Asking those questions is not going to create somebody's attempt to do that. You know, in fact, it does quite the opposite. And I'm sure that you've experienced this, Larry, and I have, where we will ask those questions and see somebody go, "Oh, thank God, finally somebody asked me how I'm doing."
Right, I've dropped warning signs and hints like for the last 2 months, and now finally somebody noticed.
Right.
And so
somebody's brave enough to say something.
Right.
Yeah. So Larry Shallard is on air with us today. This is the Way Out Recovery Hour. If you are just tuning in, come right back after this break, and we will talk more about this. Thank you.
The best live theater can be found right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. The Canyon Theater Guild has been entertaining audiences for decades with top-quality musicals and plays. Located in Old Town Newhall, the CTG also offers workshops for the young actor in your family. For more information, call the box office at 799-2702 or go to canyontheater.org.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime? And in Santa Clarita, our community supports its own domestic violence center with a shelter home, 24-hour crisis hotline, and bilingual counseling programs. If you or someone you know needs help, we're here. The 24-hour crisis hotline number is 259-HELP. For more information, go to dvcsantaclarita.com, because no one should tolerate domestic violence. 259-HELP.
Hometown.
Traffic report, simple news, weather, and lots of music. They pretty much play everything.
Your hometown station.
Welcome back to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits, and if you are just tuning in, my very special guest today is Larry Shallard, who's over at the Student Health and Wellness Center at College of the Canyons, and we are talking about mental health issues and specifically prevention of suicide. You know, I stated the numbers, but just pay attention to this. You know, we don't talk about mental health and suicidality as much as the numbers warrant. World Health Organization states that 800,000 people worldwide per year commit suicide. That's 1 every 40 seconds. Let that sink in, right? Less than a minute, every minute. On and on, somebody is completing suicide. And the statistics also say that for every completed suicide, there are 20 attempts that are not completed. And it is the second leading cause of death in the age group of 15 to 29, second leading cause of death. And so there are many things like mental health first aid and places where you can get trained so that you can be more comfortable talking about it. If you are listening today and you know somebody that is having a problem, or you yourself are having a problem, we want to give you a couple of phone numbers. So the first one is you can text the word courage to 741741. I'm going to say that again. Text the word courage to 741741. That's a crisis text line. I know a lot of people use text messages these days. And the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-TALK. if you or a loved one is having any issues, please call or text either one of those numbers and talk through it. Those are 24/7 resources available. You can also call the local sheriffs. You can call 911, or you can call any of the local providers that you have numbers for in the Santa Clarita Valley. Remember that that asking for help or talking about it is absolutely the best immediate intervention into getting the help that somebody may need. You know, Larry, as earlier in the show, I talked about some of the publicized suicides that took place in the last year. July 2017, there was a man on Placerita Canyon who took his own life. In December of 2017, a 17-year-old who took her own life. And then most recently, there was an apparent murder-suicide of an entire family. Very, very sad stuff. In September of 2017, there was a man who apparently took an Uber over to the Oak Tree Gun Club from the city of San Fernando and purchased some ammunition and rented a shotgun and then proceeded to take his own life at the Oak Tree Gun Club, which is a local organization. And as a result of that, there has been some talk amongst mental health providers, including your organization, that are going to help prevent anything like that happening. So the mental health world is now trying to bridge the gap between gun owners and gun people who use that recreationally and the mental health world. What's going on with that?
So it's a great question. It's a really important initiative. It's actually started in Colorado and New Hampshire. I was asked to speak at the American Association of Suicidology last spring on suicide and suicide prevention, especially on college campuses. And I went to one of the seminars there when I took free time, and they had people from local gun clubs and gun ranges meeting with mental health professionals on what they call means reduction. Like, how do you reduce the means? And it's not a completely new thing, because I know Cornell University had done a lot of work on and research on things like making it so that people don't jump off bridges and reducing, the availability of pharmaceuticals and so forth. But our community has never really done anything as focused as that, although we have looked at these sorts of things.
Well, there's been safety. I mean, there have been safety measures in place
right.
all along inside of the gun industry, and
right.
Right.
So the firearms industry is really good with training on safety and gun locks, and there's laws about storing guns and keeping guns away from youth and children and that sort of thing. And they're very, very, very safety conscious. I know, and especially at the Oak Tree Gun Club, they take it very seriously. But on the other hand, firearms is the number one cause of deaths by suicide in Santa Clarita Valley. So we know there's an issue there. So this question, like, what sort of things can we do? So we had our first subcommittee meeting at the Oak Tree Gun Club right before the holidays, and we started talking about, well, what can we do? We have our local mental health provider, Santa Clarita Mental Health was there, Child and Family Center there. We had the vet center there, a combat veteran who was a mental health specialist was there. Some of the media were there, and sheriff's department. So we're trying to figure out what sorts of things can we do as a community. And so one of the things that Oak Tree has said that they will do is they'll actually put notice of suicide information in every firearm they sell, which was huge. That's
a big deal. Yeah.
Great start. They also want us to come and train their staff, because when somebody takes their life, it's not just the person that takes their life that's affected, but it's everybody around them. And the people at the gun club are affected severely by a suicide. Everybody on the staff there is really affected. So they need support when this happens. but they're also up for being trained in suicide prevention and knowing the warning signs. So that's another thing. And last week we met again, and Betsy James, who's basically owner operator, has said that she will look into ways to be able to store somebody's guns if they're or a family member is feeling suicidal, which is really a big thing because we want people to be able to, temporarily give their guns to somebody else if they're feeling suicidal. For instance,
well, and it's also, I mean, it's a very big step, Larry. I have. Over the last several years, I have run into a couple of people who have had mental health issues, and one of their fear, who are also gun owners, who their fear is if I tell somebody, they're going to take everything away from me, and I'll never be able to do that again. And so to be able to
keep them.
Yeah, to be able to offer, until you're okay and we know that you're safe, here's a safe place to store your guns. So they're not accessible for you. Right?
Exactly, and they have all the legal means and licenses to be able to do that. And Betsy, as we speak, is looking into how she can make sure that that's all going to be okay. Because one of the things is you can't just give your guns to somebody. Anybody and say, hey, hold on, my
legally
guns.
you can't do that.
But but the gun club has the legal means to store them safely and to hold on to people's guns. And if, for instance, somebody has a 5150 and they're not able to have guns at all, she's willing to sell those guns on consignment so that the person doesn't have to just surrender them. They can also, actually be paid for them. So she's going to work with us on that, and she's going to work with us on being able to come and train her people on suicide prevention, and we as a team are going to be able to go in and help her team with survivors of suicide, because we know that whenever there's a suicide, it has a huge ripple effect, not just on the family, but certainly on the family and close friends, but also the whole community. So we want to be able to go in there and be able to be support for when that happens.
Well, it certainly states too. As I'm listening to you talk about it, it states to the sort of lack of stigma in the world of people that are trying to find solutions. Because when it comes to guns. Mm-hmm. People get very black and white.
Right.
And they're not able to see through their very opinionated black and white thinking, like take all the guns away, or the other side of it is, how dare you infringe on our rights? And there's big political discussion in that, and this has nothing to do with any of that stuff.
Exactly.
Right there. It's in the middle of there.
Right.
Being able to say, what can we do right now to prevent, to drop the numbers of people that are using guns to commit suicide.
Right. I mean, just by putting up posters and training people in the gun community on suicide prevention and mental health first aid, I think we can have a big impact. And it's not a political issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. Right. And people that have done this in New Hampshire and in Colorado, they were presenting their research, and they had shown in their communities that they were able to significantly impact the death of suicide by firearms. And they had people on both sides of the spectrum. They had, people that are really for gun control and gun rights, and there were people that were, both sides. And there weren't any sides when it comes to this issue. Were able to get together people in legislature and local officials and local providers and come up with some solutions, kind of like what we're talking about, but also make these. They've developed some really interesting posters and flyers and information, and so that we can just sort of become more aware of the issue, and with great success. So I think in Santa Clarita, we have this sort of unique opportunity to be able to do that here. And Betsy James and her father, Jim Mitchell, have really vowed to really get involved in this thing, and they've actually donated funds to help us with media and flyers and posters, and we're going to get people from the National Rifle Association and from some of the magazines that and in our next meeting we'll actually have hopefully we'll have some owners of other gun ranges and gun clubs in our area and really get this word out so that we can hopefully have an impact, because we know that we've really made an impact on the suicide rate of transition age youth. Most recently, we've been working on a suicide rate of seniors, which firearms is an issue, but also pharmaceuticals is an issue. We know that if we work as a community together with information sharing and care, and we can really make an impact. So we're hoping that we can do that with this initiative.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up seniors as well. I think a lot of, just to sort of throw this out there, a lot of people don't realize. So the biggest number of attempted suicides is in that age group that I talked about earlier, 15 to 29 years old. But of those that attempt, the highest completed suicide rate is in elderly men. Over the age of 65, and a lot of it has to do with, I feel like I'm a burden. Other people are taking care of me, my purpose in life, whatever that looks like. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those suicides are with prescription medications.
Exactly.
Because it's available, they're prescribed. The same what you're talking about doing with not having the means to complete that suicide is the same thing that happens with pharmaceuticals. That's why we do drug take-back days. That's why we do all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Is if you have, so just to sort of put it out there, if you have firearms in your house or any other dangerous thing that could be used for suicide, whether it's firearms or pharmaceuticals, if you need them, lock them up. Do not allow anybody else to have access to those without them having a key or a combination or something to get to them. And if you're not using them anymore, get rid of them. You're old. Any guns you have laying around or stuff like that, you can surrender those to the sheriff's station, and they'll gladly take them off your hands. They'll dispose of them. Same thing with drugs. Right.
I know you've talked a lot about this on your shows, but a lot of times with teenagers and young people, the suicide and the drug abuse often comes from aunt and uncle's medicine cabinet and grandparents' medicine cabinet. So we have to be aware of that as well. But the issue of senior suicide is significant, and we know that it's a very high rate here in Santa Clarita. We probably underestimate it because sometimes people die in their sleep, and maybe they took something on the way to bed or something like that. So actually, in our suicide prevention, postvention, and wellness committee, we've invited all of our senior centers like Comfort Keepers and Sunrise and some of our medical people like Gene Dorio and some of our local seniors of influence to our committee. And we've been working on that issue of senior suicide for about 6 months now, and I think we made a really big impact. We've done a series of trainings on senior suicide, and I've learned something about senior suicide. Even though I'm not a senior, I'm getting really close. Actually, I am now. I think I crossed.
Dropping the age.
I'm not sure what the age is. But we know that I've learned things like depression in as a senior is not necessarily normal. So when you see somebody that's depressed, and know the warning signs are similar, but as you stated, some of the issues are different. Medical issues or feeling like a burden or feeling like loss of purpose, pain, loss of a spouse is a big one, other family members. So we know there's issues. We know people that are seniors can live exciting and full lives, and when depression or other mental illness is present, we know it's serious. We want to take it seriously. You don't want to say, oh, well, everybody that's old is depressed. That's not true, at all.
Right.
So, and same with adolescents. Depression, adolescents get depressed, and we all maybe get depressed at a certain point. But it's not normal to be depressed for long periods of time.
Right.
So,
right.
And especially feeling hopeless. Those are those are really important warning signs.
Well, one of my very, very dear friends who is pushing 80, he might even be 80 now, he had some recent pain issues, some recent surgeries and stuff in the last several years. And because I was armed with that information, like I watched him go through his pain, everybody's concerned about him. They're always asking him, how you doing physically. And I had the opportunity to pull him aside one day and I said, hey, I'm concerned about you, emotionally. How are you doing with that? And it was really, the conversation we had was neat because he was, we've known each other for enough years where he was honest with me and he said, thanks for your concern, because of course that's crossed my mind. I don't want to deal with this. I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. And he had considered that, and I told him I was concerned and I was there for him, and it was because I had that information. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have thought about that. So
right. I mean, you think and you don't think about it. Once you know, it's like, hey, just ask.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask, because that's the first part of mental health first aid, is to assess. And the way you assess is sort of approach person and ask. And you can ask what's going on, but you can ask, hey, are you thinking about suicide? And it's not unusual for people to say, yeah, I thought about it. And they say, but I wouldn't because this reason, that reason. That's okay. But then, the next thing we really want to do is as you did, you listen non-judgmentally and find out, well, what's going on? That's my favorite question. Well, what's going on? So they'll be able to tell you, hey, I'm in a lot of pain and I'm not, thinking I can handle it. I don't want to handle it or whatever. It's really difficult for me. So asking what's going on and listening non-judgmentally is a really important part of first aid. And then to know that people can recover, so we tell people, give some reassurance. And the more information you have about pain or depression or mental illness or seniors, the better. So you can give information about that and encourage professional help. We know when there's a suicide or when there's a suicide attempt or when you're thinking about suicide, often professional help is the really important piece. And we know, like with veterans, for instance, there's 20 veterans a day that take their life.
Well, you had mentioned earlier that there's a vet on the committee,
right.
With your interaction with Oak Tree and the gun industry and everything.
Right.
And that's really, really important because you have a population that's been trained to use firearms and and also high stress level and a lot of like PTSD and issues like that.
And often own firearms.
That own firearms
right.
and also can suffer, very dramatically from mental health issues. Right. And so the number is 20 a day.
20 a day.
And that's in the United States, right?
Right.
20 a day in the United States.
And we know most veterans are not suicidal. Most veterans don't have PTSD, but there is a significant population that does have serious issues with either PTSD or traumatic brain injury or having difficulty reintegrating or dealing with being a senior. There's people from all kinds of branches of the service and all kinds of different wars and military situations. So it's a population we really want to be sensitive to and feel like we can encourage professional help. And the Vet Center is one of the best. They're on our campus, and the one on our committee is a combat veteran trained in mental health. And we try to tell veterans, hey, counseling is a tool. It's like, everything else, every other tool you've learned to use. And you're going to be a better soldier, a better citizen if you use that tool when you need it.
Well, and that counseling skill, to get that across to somebody who's been trained to like tough it out, right?
Right.
They talk about stigma.
It's
like
counterintuitive
it's a big deal, right?
to them, but
it's a big deal. Yeah.
Right.
Well, if you're just joining us, you're catching the last end of the show, but you can always catch this on Facebook. We stream it live right now on KHTS. It will also be shared on the Way Out Recovery SCV Facebook page and the Student Health and Wellness Center Facebook page at College of the Canyons. We are talking about mental health issues and specifically suicide prevention in studio with Larry Schallert, and we are not done yet. So stay tuned after these messages, and we'll come back and give you some numbers if you're having trouble. Thanks.
Drugs or alcohol abuse can tear a family apart. In Santa Clarita, just like everywhere else, it's an epidemic. The Way Out Recovery is here to help. Call them now at 296-4444 or visit them on the web at thewayoutrocoveryscv.com. The Way Out offers outpatient treatment for adolescents, adults, and family members. The Way Out is compassionate, caring, professional, and confidential. You and your family don't have to suffer any longer. Call the Way Out Recovery now, 296-4444, or visit thewayoutrocoveryscv.com and make an appointment. Asking for help is the first step.
It's allergy season again. You've tried it all, yet your sinuses continue to be a problem. Try something different, something holistic, something that will really work. Acupuncture. Kathleen Keneally is Santa Clarita's acupuncture and innate specialist. She's been treating many of your neighbors and their children for allergies, sinuses, headaches, and pain. Find out how acupuncture can improve the quality of your life. Call Kathleen Keneally for a free phone consultation. 252-4100. 252-4100. Acupuncture. It really works.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Welcome back to the Way Out Recovery Hour. I'm Bob Sharits, and we are the Way Out. You know, if you or a loved one is suffering from mental health or substance use disorder or issues, asking for help is the first step. Call us for help at 296-4444. In studio with me today is Larry Schallert from College of the Canyons Student Health and Wellness Center. We have been talking about mental health issues and suicidality specifically. There's unfortunately, we live in a world today where almost every day we hear about mass shootings, suicides, all the stuff that's going on out there. Right. And a lot of it ties into mental health issues. I don't know if just the chaotic life that is out there and all the stress that's involved is sort of putting people at a much higher risk for this, or if we're just better at finding out when people have it and diagnosing and being able to talk about it. But certainly we hear about these things every single day. And the biggest tools that we have are to do stuff like this, Larry, and to come on and talk about it and get people comfortable enough discussing the issues that they don't want to talk about. Right. If you are listening right now and you or a loved one is having any sort of issues, I want to put a couple of numbers out there. These are 24/7. This is a texting line. It's a crisis text line. Text the word courage to 741741, or anytime 24/7 you can call the suicide prevention hotline, lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. And one of the things that we have talked about is mental health first aid. We would love to see a day where everyone gets some awareness training and some real tools so that everyone in every home knows about mental health issues and is able to help in some manner. What is the basis in terms of the principles behind mental health first aid, Larry?
So mental health first aid is a recovery-based program that's evidence-based. We've been using it across everywhere in the world now. It started in Australia, and there's several basic concepts, but it really comes down to there's 5 things you can do if there's a mental health crisis. And this is, for somebody that's survived suicide, somebody that's attempting suicide, somebody that's thinking about suicide, or any kind of mental health kinds of issues. So we use the acronym ALGEE, ALGEE. So A stands for assessment. So you approach somebody and you assess, is this a suicidal person? Is this somebody that's thinking about suicide?
Hey, I noticed this is going on with you. Are you okay? Is that right? Okay.
Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about harming yourself or somebody else?
And don't be afraid to ask that.
We know that something. Yeah. Often that is a sense of relief. People get a sense of relief. Somebody asked. The second one is L, listen. So listen non-judgmentally. We mentioned it before. It's not, don't say, hey, I'm having trouble with my girlfriend. Oh, don't worry about her. She's no good anyway. No, be non-judgmental and just try to figure out, find out what's going on. Just the active listening is a really important piece. And then give reassurance. We know that people can recover. That's the United States' contribution to mental health first aid, the concept of recovery. People that have trauma, people that have PTSD, depression, even schizophrenia, bipolar disorder.
People do recover.
People do recover,
Absolutely.
and we know they recover. You know, you're way out recovery. That's the name. We know people can recover, and sometimes there's a stigma that says, "Hey, you had this and you can't recover." So, give reassurance, give some information, learn about drug and alcohol abuse, learn about mental health, learn about bipolar disorder, whatever. And then the fourth one is encourage professional help. We know that, if there's been a suicide in the family, professional help is important. If there's been a trauma, whether it's a sexual assault or no matter what, human trafficking, no matter what, if people are suicidal or people having mental health, you can encourage professional help. There's people that can help. And then the fifth one's also really important. It's called encourage self-help and other self-help strategies. We know that exercise is the number one thing for mental health, right. But also mindfulness, or also spirituality, hanging out with your church community, hanging out with friends, talking with family, AA.
There are a lot of support groups out there.
NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. There's lots of support groups. There's lots of support that you can just get from your community, volunteer work, that sort of thing. So exercise. So I know it's hard to remember all those things, but it's algae, assess, listen, encourage, reassure. Those sorts of things that you can do it, and when instead of being really anxious, you can sort of back into those sorts of strategies, and you can be really helpful.
And you guys do that every semester at College of the Canyons. That's something that's open to everybody.
Right, it's open to the whole community. We do it at least once a semester. Often we'll do it 2 or 3 times to specialized groups like the American Medical Association or whoever invites us to do it, but we'll do it at least once for the community each semester.
And we have a couple of minutes left. I know May is Mental Health Month,
right.
And you guys have a couple of events that you do. The Body Mind Wellness.
Our Body Mind Wellness Committee has events every week or so. We have something like in February 3rd, we're working with UCLA to do a conference at the college on autism and transition age youth. In May, we have a big thing that demonstrates that addresses the issue of college suicide, because there's 1,100 college students every year that take their life. So often KHTS is out there supporting us.
When you put out all the white chairs on campus, it made such a huge statement, and that's part of raising awareness.
Right.
When you go on the COC campus and you see all those empty chairs and realize those are lives that are taken from something that is preventable.
Right.
That is preventable.
And this year we'll do Chinese lanterns, just colorful Chinese lanterns that represent the lives of all the students that take their life. It's a very dramatic display, and we'll do some training around that issue as well. And we have Ask the Psychiatrist, and we have stress management and anger management. We try to get out there in the community and on the campus to try to raise awareness and try to address the issue of stigma and information sharing.
So thanks, Larry. Thanks for being on the show today. If you are a student or you have a student that goes to College of the Canyons, please be aware that there is a resource called the Student Health and Wellness Center. It's available to anybody on campus. You can walk in anytime.
It's free.
And it is free, and it is located across from the bookstore. Right there in the student center, right?
Exactly.
And so it's easy to find. A lot of people on campus may not know about it, but it is there for everybody. And if you or someone needs immediate help, 24/7 hotline, 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, 1-800-273-8255. is an emergency, a suicide prevention hotline that you can call anytime. And if you need resources in the community, please call us at the Way Out Recovery, 296-4444. Larry, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for drawing attention to this important issue. I know KHTS has been just really a leader in dealing with this issue and getting the word out and getting out the word on resources. So we totally appreciate you and all you do at Way Out Recovery and all you do at this station, Bob.
Thanks, Larry. And remember, in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, take the time to be kind to somebody today. Give them a hug, shake their hand, and just get out there and celebrate and honor the diversity that we have in our community. Larry, we'll talk again. This is the Way Out Recovery. Thanks, everybody.